Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. Today's guest is Dr. Patrick Graham, CEO of We Build Concord, nonprofit and public leader, and an architect of economic and social justice initiatives. Dr. Graham has spent his career at the intersection of housing, workforce development, equity, public policy, and community transformation. His work has transformed so many people, including myself, and has helped hundreds of thousands of households and individuals through efforts tied to employment, education, housing stability, and wealth building. At We Build Concord, He's leading regional affordable housing efforts that connect housing to a broader community and economic outcomes. He stands at the intersection of transformation, economic development, and leadership. Dr. Graham, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm fantastic. It's been such a too long of a time since we've last connected, but you've taught me so much. You've evolved. We Build Concord so far, and I'd love for just our audience to be introduced to who you are outside of any titles or any of the things that we introduced you as.
Well, I grew up and was raised on hip hop and grits. I'll start off with that. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and but was raised actually by Southerners. My mother was from Alabama. About 70% of the people who were adults in my neighborhood at the time were first generation migrants during the great migration up north. And so I really embraced the fact that I had this sort of real sense of the Black American inner diaspora here in the States from that experience.
How has that really led you to the work that you do today? Because I think that there's always a story behind the work that we do.
Sure. I think, well, one of the things is that a lot of those Southerners who came north, like in my community, actually developed institutions of their own. So the church that I attended, Christian Light Missionary Baptist Church, was actually a welcome center for migrants who were coming up during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. One of the earliest leadership roles as a CEO that I had was the Martin Luther King Center in Long Island, where I actually grew up and attended as a kid. And it was started by Southern migrants in that area, in that community. So they did youth services, some economic and educational services. So I'm really just proud of coming up the way that I did. And then, of course, there was hip hop itself. So outside of church, I had a toe in the street, and it allowed me to see how young people would take an art form and use it as a political and social statement. Yeah. Overall, though, my mother, being one of those Southern migrants, also was one of the featured witnesses in a federal case for discrimination in housing. back in '91. It was the U.S. versus the Village of Island Park.
Yeah.
And so she went undercover, applied, knowing that she didn't want to live in a certain development, but knew that they were actually discriminating. And so she did that and was able to help prove that.
Wow. Your work is exciting. And it's truly impactful work. And I've seen it firsthand. And what I see is that it focuses in two areas, really: equity and systems change. When you think of equity and systems change, how would you define those words and why they're so important, rather just the theory that shadows them sometimes?
Well, I know that it's very important that we understand various things such as housing, workforce, economic development. All of these have systems, and they have systems that actually at times interface with one another.
Yeah.
And so when I think about systems change, I really think about operating out of current systems, operating outside of them. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we look at the way things have been developed, we tend to sort of try to make change within them, but you actually have to go a little bit outside of them. And one of the things that we did, for example, we built Concord, is that so we had to have one of the most fluid models where we took some of the best practices, but instead of actually just going with one or the other, we did them situationally. So, for example, if you have someone you're trying to get into to desegregate a community, I would sometimes use what we call a community land trust model that would make the homes there permanently affordable, because if we didn't, they would simply go away over time. Or at times, there are young people who might need more down payment assistance. So we created an internal down payment assistance to go along with government through what we call a loaned equity program. It's where we actually loan you the equity at zero interest. And that when you sell, yes, you pay that back, but at the same time, you lowered your payment while you were there. I mean, it's just different ways that you can do this, but you just can't operate in the way that currently things are done.
How do I'm so interested because over the last maybe year and some change, I've even dealt personally, and that I've shared on the podcast maybe 2 or 3 times, that I've had a squatter and a rental property that I own. And I mentioned this on one of my episodes, and we really unpacked it. And it's not about the squatter. It's about the deeper affordable housing issues within the city of Charlotte and just outside of these areas. But when I think about, loan assistance programs and all of these programs, and even the program that you just mentioned, how from a business model can you still run an organization when you have some of these programs that are built to help people essentially get into homes at such a low cost?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a very difficult business model because unlike most business models, we can't sell or rent based off of what we put in them.
Yeah.
And so that's where you really have to develop strong partnerships across the public, social, and private sector. And that means that sometimes we'll be using grants, sometimes very low equity loans to help people. And I don't like to use the word subsidy, but to help invest in people in their future. So, for example, we used American Rescue Plan dollars to develop this one community called the Lincoln Street Townhomes, which is right there in the Logan community, one of the oldest communities in Cabarrus County. And we used $2 million of that because it was reimbursed back to us once we spent it. So that allowed us to take that type of injection of cash and then pass it on to the buyer as we began to, take on the expense of building the project. But now we're able to also pass that savings on to the end user.
Okay. Now, from a leadership perspective, thinking through the various partnerships that it would require to be able to do this work, not just at scale, but do it in a sustainable way. How do you recommend a leader listening in that doesn't have the traditional business model, but really wants to drive impact, but keep an organization sustainable over the next 7 to 10 years? How would you recommend them approaching the work that they're doing?
I think one, you got to really understand the basic principles of business practices for one. So take time to really learn your craft, particularly when it's in a certain field.
Yeah.
I came to housing actually from a policy standpoint, but had never actually been a developer. So I actually went to Columbia University and took courses, began to read up more, study, and sort of really fortify myself with what was already out there.
Yeah.
And then there were times, though, that when you come in new, you say, hey, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Maybe there's another way to do this. Or sometimes you're just that naive and you end up doing something really creative. So I would say, be open to obviously learning your craft, but also be open to listening to your gut as you learn that sometimes there are some things that don't make sense. And maybe there is something that can be changed. A lot of people don't change things because they feel, because it hasn't been done, that it's either not something they can do, it's not legal, whatever it is. But found that actually a lot of times it's not the case. And I've seen that many times in my career where we've made some very beneficial changes for people, and we were wondering what's been holding us back all this time.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I'd love to know your perspective, Dr. Graham. There's a lot of issues that we face, and of one of the biggest issues, as we know, is economic development, especially around affordable housing. Do you believe that this issue could be solved, or are there certain systems, like we talked about earlier, that will keep this challenge that many people face from being solved? And if you do believe that it can be solved, what will it take to really be able to solve some of the challenges that we're seeing, not just here in our city, but throughout the country?
Well, first, housing doesn't live in a vacuum. So you've had, since the pandemic, about an 18% plus increase in housing costs, only about a 4% increase in wages. And you've also had almost a 20 to 21% increase in construction itself. So you won't build your way out of it. I will say that. You won't build your way out of it. But I do think that you'll have to actually simultaneously build people and build homes or quality housing at the same time. And, I know a lot of people use affordable, but I mean, what we do is quality homes with affordability in mind.
That's good.
And I think that that's important too. I think, well, one of the things that, to part of your question is how it's just going to be reimagining spaces. I think we're going to have to also get more companies, as we're courting them, to come into our cities as part of our economic development plans, to also come in with some plan or at least some partnership around how they're going to house workers. That's one step you can do on the economic side, because oftentimes with economic development, we're thinking about just bringing the company in, we're thinking about tax benefits, and we don't think about housing as part of the actual mix. And that's obviously something that's doomed to fail, because you have to have places for people to work, have to have places that they can afford. I think the other is really going into communities and starting to invest in talent development in more unique ways. A lot of our organizations, you want the people to come to you, but you're going to have to come to them. You're going to have some real outreach strategies that are meaningful and that people can develop trust, and then you can help co-lead them to finding resources that up their mobility, because we have a lot of talent. It's just untapped. A long time ago, I coined the term not at risk, but at opportunity, meaning that we can't be looking at these communities as risk. We have to look at them as opportunities, invest them in that same way you would invest in any opportunity that can grow. So I think you're going to have to do two things at one time, or multiple things at one time, and I think that we can. I think we have the ingenuity. I think we have the innovation. What we have to have is the desire and be able to see the long-term benefit beyond what we see in front of us.
I'd love to know, you mentioned something so powerful, and I agree with it. There's a lot of times where these companies or individuals expect for the community or these populations to come to us rather than us go into those communities. For that organization listening that has access to capital, is really trying to do different things, access to these networks, relationships, or influence, what does going into those communities actually look like in practice on a day-to-day?
So I think part of it is that you're giving a carrot of trust to communities when you come in. A lot of them have heard things, have seen promises that have gone unfulfilled. Yeah. So I think that one is to embrace the skepticism that's there. That's one, because it's there for a reason. Two, show yourself friendly by not trying to force people into your total way of thinking, but begin to introduce some of that. And I'll give you an example. Community colleges have a lot of great opportunities in terms of certifications, other types of training that's available. But sometimes it may be that they need to go into communities and set up shop to do smaller things that introduce people to them. I'll give you an example. One of the things we're proposing is that, you need an OSHA certification most of the time just about do anything in both manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, construction, etc. It would be great and come at low cost, and I would say it should be free to communities, that those community colleges join partners like ours and others, and they do OSHA training, get people certified, and then as they're doing that, begin to talk to them about what are some of the other avenues that's there.
That's good.
People are just not exposed.
Yeah.
We talk about necessity being the mother of invention, but, exposure is the father of innovation. You got to be able to give people some exposure. Yeah. And a lot of times we're assuming that they know something that they really don't know. Yeah. And it really requires you to be a lover of communities. And I'll say it's an acronym that I use, and that's, you've got to listen, you got to observe, you got to validate, you've got to engage, and then you got to respect. And I think that doing that, wash and repeat, just keep loving them, be a lover constantly. It allows you to really develop, hopefully, a great relationship, but also one that leads to some mobility for people in ways that you probably couldn't imagine. And I get surprised by people that have been in programs that I may have overseen as a president or a CEO almost every other month. And it is one of the most fulfilling feelings ever.
When you think of your L.O.V.E.R acronym, and I've heard this at a speaking engagement where you spoke on our panel at the school, what do you think is the most important word in that acronym?
Well, respect. And I think the reason that respect is there at the end is really an exclamation point, because if you respect people enough, you're going to listen, you'll learn to observe, you'll validate how they feel, as well as also validate some things that you may come in with.
Yeah.
And you'll definitely be willing to engage them. So, respect is always important in love, because without respect, then love doesn't have a real meaning.
I love that. Dr. Graham, you've interfaced with a lot of leaders within your tenure. What do you believe is the single trait or the group of traits that leads and creates leaders to be actually effective in the roles that you all sit?
I think the first thing is courage. Um, we have, I've encountered situations where I've had very courageous people, and then I've had cowards at the gate.
Mm.
And what I've noticed is that those who are courageous enough to stand on principle, courageous enough to take the necessary and calculated risks that need to be taken, I've found them to be much more successful. So courage is definitely one of them. I think the other is adaptability, um, being able to adapt through ambiguity and sometimes even your own ambivalent feelings.
Yeah.
Um, in this environment, things change so much. I think about housing, and housing is so much impacted by economy.
Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth culture doesn't change because we talk about it, it changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do, build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching. Now let's get back to the program.
By political winds that you can't control it all. So sometimes you're going through very ambiguous moments when you're trying to work through them. So I think that people who are adaptable and can remain calm as they try to work through things. And then I think that the other, outside of just, learning your craft that I talked about before is just being able to be resilient through change. It's one thing to be adaptable, but to really actually, go through it and make it to the end. I think it's something that is getting lost at times in even my current generation. That resiliency. We see it in areas of mental health. We see it in the way that it's so easy for us to give up.
Yeah.
We see it in our politics, the way that some people can just say, my vote doesn't count, doesn't make sense. I haven't seen the change I want, therefore I just give in.
Yeah.
That resiliency is very important.
What will it take, Dr. Graham? And you bring up a great point for us to get back to some of those principles of resiliency, of grit, of courage, and those various things that seem to be lost, especially within this generation.
Well, I think that this generation and young generation, I do believe that there's a lot of courage there. But then the courage has to be combined with that resiliency. And I think that we have to actually talk to our young people about our own victories and transgressions and be able to talk about how we made it through those moments. People need firm examples of that type of resiliency. And the reason I say that, people are big on courage, I get plenty of people who say they can do something and just jump out.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily, they didn't take the time to really learn the craft, to go through something, to experiment. And, everybody wants to be the CEO tomorrow. And the reality is it doesn't work that way. So for a lot of them, I do want them to also have some patience. And I'm not talking about the kind of patience that sort of just lets opportunities keep going by, but I'm talking about the patience to know that you're going to have to learn something. You're going to have to go through something in order to make it. You don't come out of law school and just become a judge. And I've seen it happen, though.
Really? Oh, man.
Well, some of these are elected roles. So,
Yeah.
I just recently commented on an incident that happened, in another state, I believe it's Texas. And a young sister, 26 but had just gotten out. And, I've made the comment that I hope that her experience and wisdom before this allows her to make decisions that not only uphold the law, but actually make an imprint in her community. And, some people say, oh, you wouldn't say that if, it's just because she's young and she's a woman and she's black. And all of this stuff, they don't even realize who they're talking to.
Yeah.
Because of all I've done for both of those communities. But the issue is that we have to toughen up a little bit and really sort of not try to place ourselves in a position to be beyond reproach. I mean, we have to be able to have dialogue. And there were some people who came in and tried to say, no, I understand exactly what he's saying. He's saying that not saying that she doesn't have an experience that can be helpful, but he is really trying to be honest about, you don't come out of law school and then become a judge in a year.
No.
It's just
no.
Where if anyone else does that, we say something.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying, go through something.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I believe that my leadership journey began when I faced the biggest challenge. And there was an unpacking and an unveiling and an unbecoming that needed to happen so that I could be able to understand how I could serve better, how I could lead better. And I had to become better before I could lead better with the people that I was being called to serve. So anybody listening, take your time. You do not often. You're supposed to go through the fire and go through a period of time where you're understanding and learning and creating that experience and change before you are leading the charge as well. Dr. Graham, I'd love to know, and I always ask this on this podcast, what was one of your slingshot moments, though? What was a moment that pulled you back and brought you down that really allowed you to really sling forward as well in your own life?
Wow. That's a good question because there's many. Many slingshot moments. I think the one early on, when I was 26 years old, I became the executive director of the Martin Luther King Center. And I was really struggling at the time with, there were older youth and adults who were selling drugs in that community, and sometimes would frequent the center when I took it over. And then I had these young children that also needed protection, and there was a child care there too as well. So I put up a sign reminding everyone that in New York at the time, there was a more severe penalty if you committed certain acts within 1,000 feet of a school. But the way that was interpreted was two ways. There were those who praised it and said, we've got to put people on notice and we've got to be responsible and accountable. And then there was those people who were very angry because they thought with the way that 3 strikes laws were going at the time, this is the the mid 90s. So in the mid 90s, of course, we had one of the most notorious crime bills during 96 and then Clinton administration, as well as with that Congress and legislature. And it was a real good lesson to me in terms of how to first listen to people before they move. Because I was so caught up in my emotions and trying to protect that I forgot to first have those dialogues and listen. And I had, the NAACP and some other were very angry with me, and we began to talk through it. And they began to understand my perspective. And obviously, I had been a kid in the NAACP, so it wasn't like I didn't understand where they were coming from. And we got to a point though where we said, how are we going to help each other? Because now I understand what you're up against on a daily basis. And I'm over here talking about in terms of policy,
Yeah,
but lived experience and that policy may not always be matching.
exactly.
And we really became such great comrades that they even gave me an award that year, which was interesting. So I went from being this villain to a good guy, I guess, just because I decided I made a mistake. I need to listen, regardless of whether I thought I was right or not. Is not the point.
Yeah.
Point is, I had to listen, and so that definitely helped me be more open, vulnerable, and really have an open door policy. So much to the point that I've had even my wife and others complain that I'm too accessible. But at the end of the day, it's sort of what got me here. So there's some bad habits that you hold on to because there's been some good things come from them.
Exactly. Dr. Graham, this conversation has been amazing, and it's I always love learning from you as well, and your philosophies and perspectives. For our nonprofit listeners and our leaders that are running and growing their nonprofit organizations, what do you wish more people understood about systems and about building systems, not just building programs?
I think one is that people fear building systems because they think that at times that doesn't help keep the lights on. And so we get into these programmatic things because we want to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
But when you really look at it from a systemic approach, you're really discovering where you belong in that, where that you see partnerships and others that can grow not only the system, but grow what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And by taking that approach, you can also help lead in that system as opposed to being a beneficiary of it or lack of, or not beneficiary at all. Being participating as a leader in a system helps not only the organization, but it helps build a stronger system for the people you serve. And I think that's more important at the end of the day. The desire is that we work ourselves out of business. And we know that that's probably something that will occur well beyond the years that we're here, but it's always the end goal.
What gives you hope these days when you think about the future of housing, equity, community, and economic development?
People, straight out people. I just had two young ladies, two sisters, one 22 years old, who's our youngest homeowner, and a 26-year-old. They now own homes side by side.
I love
with
it.
a mortgage under $1,000. And they are child care teachers, both of them, teaching 2- and 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
And we thought it was robbery, right, as a society to pay them what they're worth, even though they have a most precious asset. Yeah. But when I got to see them smiling, and let me tell you how good people can be. One of them was pregnant and had a baby 2 days before closing. You know, our law firm felt it not robbery to go to the hospital in a private room set aside for them and do the closing there for her.
Wow.
Right? What it is that there are a lot of good people in the world. We just don't always lift them up as much as we lift up those who want to do bad or those who want to cause chaos and confusion. And so I still think it's the people. I get to see a lot of people, and I've got to see over my course of my career, it'll be 30 years come this fall, who have done some amazing things. I'll just share one quick story with you. When I was looking at the Lincoln Street townhomes and we were in the middle of development, there was a young man who came up to me and he said, "How you doing, Dr. Graham?" And we shook hands, and I saw that he was working on the fiber part of our project.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he was the manager of the project. And he said, well, you don't really remember me. He said, but I believe like in your last days at the Urban League, I was told that you had helped create the broadband fiber optic program there. Well, I went through that program. And I was, amazed because now here I got to see this person who at one time was in this program. He had come out of incarceration, rebuilt his life, and here he was leading this team, and he was actually doing it on a development that I had. So now he was helping me fulfill a dream where I once helped him fulfill one. That, to me, is the ultimate way that, there are good people in the world.
That's such an amazing way to land this episode. With listeners listening in right now that have lost hope in humanity, that have had some struggles, that have experienced some challenges, but still have that deep desire to want to do more. Dr. Graham, what would you say to those people?
I say to you is to pray and don't wait for the perfect moment. Nothing will be perfect. You're going to have to go ahead out, have courage, and take a chance. I think too oftentimes we're waiting for all the waves to be calm. We're waiting for the sun to be shining. But a lot of times you've been made for the moment at that very time. There's something that's in you, something that's been placed in you that God has allowed you to have that will make you more resilient through it. You just have to realize that's who it is. I once had a young lady say, she said, you don't know who you are, do you? And it took me a while to understand what she really meant by that question.
Dr. Graham, I appreciate you. I appreciate how you lead in this work, your wisdom, the depth that you bring to every single room and conversation, and just your willingness to remind us that there's still hope, that there's still an opportunity for us to have real change, real impact, real transformation within our communities. Where can people find out more information about you and learn more about We Build Concord?
Or you can go straight to our website at www.webuildconcord.org. You can always catch me on Instagram at Dr. P. Graham. Also, get on our LinkedIn with We Build Concord under the same name, our Facebook, We Build Concord. And you'll not only see what we're doing, but what people are doing for themselves.
Dr. Graham, I appreciate you so much. And everybody listening, I hope this conversation challenges you to think bigger about leadership, think bigger about equity, think bigger about transformation. Because what we always like to say is that the strongest cultures are not only built inside walls, they are built through the choices that we make every single day to strengthen our communities. One of the questions that we always ask our listeners is, what type of culture are you building? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Go make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture Podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.